My name is Kunal Bhasin. I co-lead the Digital Asset Center of Excellence for KPMG in Canada, but I work globally with our KPMG member firms, including US, Spain, Austria, Dubai, etc. I would say one of the key themes that I'm excited about is tokenization of real world assets, specifically commercial real estate. I do think there's a lot of value in that technology being into the picture because it unlocks a lot of liquidity for the secondary market for the key players in the industry today. The second theme I'm very excited about is stablecoins. And I know that's been a topic of discussion for Canada and the regulatory environment here. And hopefully we get a much more sound regulation for stablecoins for that technology to actually flourish in Canada. And I do really think there is an absolute need for that. You need to think about the operational efficiencies that comes with tokenization of a real world assets. Like the example that I was talking about, especially in commercial real estate, today, a lot of institutional investors, including family offices and other wealth managers, are not able to get access to some of the commercial real estate opportunities which they would get access to if those were tokenized. Today, you have only very few limited players that are able to participate in that market, including pension funds and some of the large asset managers. But you need to also unlock that. They also want the secondary market liquidity to be unlocked, and that's what tokenization can bring in, especially for commercial real estate. But if you think about different, if you talk about tokenized securities, just the middle and back office function, how that can be streamlined with tokenization and leveraging the blockchain technology underneath. Those are things that I'm really excited about. I think a lot of it is dependent on the US election this year because we know Trump, he's come out and supported crypto quite vocally. He's been very vocal about what his stance to crypto is. Now, the presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, she has not been as vocal of a support, but she's also not been as anti as we've seen the current administration be. But at the end of the day, I still feel, it's a technology. You need to regulate it like any other technology, like AI or anything else. And yes, there needs to be sound regulation. There needs to be, regulation to make sure bad actors don't really play a big part of this industry. But the focus needs to be on all the good that this industry brings about. And the regulatory environment, especially the tone from the top coming in from the federal level in the US, can set the tone for crypto adoption globally. We've seen the impact of, as an example, how US Bitcoin ETF launched, how that impacted the adoption of Bitcoin ETFs in some of the largest institutions around the globe. And I do feel that with the presidential election, if we get a candidate that is, whether it's Trump or Kamala, as long as their tone to the industry is that more of a collaborative nature rather than, enforcement actions, then it is good for the industry at the end of the day. The adoption so far has primarily been retail for the ETFs. We're still waiting to see a large chunk of wealth that exists or that is currently being managed by the wealth managers, the asset managers, all of those large players in the industry. We're still waiting to see a lot of adoption on that level. And those are trillions of dollars just waiting to be unlocked to go into this, Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs. And I'm saying that like even with a very small allocation percentage of that portfolio, I don't think anyone should have 100% of their assets in a single bucket. But, a small allocation to Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs has actually proven throughout its history that even a small allocation to Bitcoin or Ethereum for a 10-year or longer period actually improves the Sharpe ratio, which means you're getting a better return. So although a lot of adoption so far has been through retail, I do see a lot of potential of growth in the AUM for Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs in the US as well as here in Canada. And, in Canada, we also have staked Ethereum ETFs, so we have an edge on the US market right now, but I do expect that to change sometime soon in the US. Yeah, so I do think it serves as a catalyst for the first entry point for people into investing into crypto assets. And, this vehicle actually allows them to invest and get exposure to crypto assets without managing all of the technical details behind it. So it's a good entry point for them. But you'll start to see people wanting to get more direct allocation to crypto. And you'll start to see wealth advisors and RIAs actually allocate to crypto directly on behalf of their clients rather than just the ETF vehicle. Because ETF vehicles, yes, there is a management fee involved. And in Canada, that management fee I've seen is much more than what we have seen in other products in the US. So there are investors that are looking for that direct exposure towards crypto. And that could unlock a whole new level of adoption because once they get into a Bitcoin or an Ether ETF, they understand how it works. They'll start to see some of the opportunities to adopt stable coins, for example. And that's where you see the mass adoption of like just this technology as a whole, where a bulk of people that are not in the industry today are starting to use these products and get exposure to these products without actually knowing that, oh, there's a blockchain underneath it. With stable coins, that is the primary use case, right? For payments, sending money across borders. So remittance is another one. And today, as much of the mature infrastructure we have here in Canada and globally, there is still a significant room for improvement in how payments work. Because as a retail, yes, I made the payment today, but as a business, if I'm accepting that payment, I may not get that money in my account for a couple of days. And so a lot of efficiencies are going to be brought about by stablecoin as a means of payment. And yeah, I do see a lot of that potential coming out. We're still seeing payment processors like Stripe now actually going towards like end retailers that are accepting crypto as payment. And in the back end, those payment processors are just directly converting into fiat. So those retailers don't even know that they're accepting stable coins or crypto. And yeah, I mean, I don't see a lot of people wanting to buy a coffee or using their Bitcoin, but I do see the opportunity for stable coins to actually bring more efficiencies into that market. You know, it takes a long time for any new technology to get mainstream adoption. We've been at this curve for almost, 13 years now, 13, 14 years now, but stablecoins is still a relatively new technology, a relatively new concept. In Canada, one, we don't even have appropriate stablecoin regulation. So for payments to be used as become a mainstream use case for crypto, I think stablecoins is the underlying technology. I don't anticipate people buying coffee using their Bitcoin or ETH. You know, it's a stablecoin, the underlying technology that needs to empower that. But we still don't have proper regulations here in Canada for stablecoin. You know, stablecoins are nothing but money market funds or like reserve assets in the bank and those dollars on the blockchain. And that brings in a lot of operational efficiencies, but it still needs to be regulated by entities like Bank of Canada, the way they regulate PayPal, for example. So I still feel there is a lot more opportunity in terms of the regulatory environment and the regulatory maturity that we need for stablecoins. And that will trigger how, you know, some of the payment processors and how the adoption for payments as a mean or stablecoins as a mean for payments will actually flourish. But there still needs to be a lot more education on that front because the end retailer today doesn't know the difference between a dollar. They don't even know what goes on in the back end of a bank when they're accepting, like, let's say a Visa or a MasterCard or even a debit card payment today. So I'm not saying they don't need to understand all of that, but I want them to understand that there is another mechanism which may be a lower fee alternative for them to be able to accept those payments. And that piece of education is something that I think will also help, but we need proper regulation for it to become mainstream. I think in the Canadian landscape, some of the larger institutions, we're still waiting to see a lot more adoption, especially we've seen pilots, we've seen proof of concepts by some of the large FIs in Canada. But what we've not seen is actually any of those pilots going beyond a proof of concept or something like into production. We've not seen banks being involved in on-chain activity at all. We're seeing a lot of that happen outside of Canada, like in the US with BlackRock. We're seeing that in Europe with a lot of different banks getting a lot of different exposure to different crypto asset companies and infrastructure. Soon we'll see some of the banks actually step in and engage with the industry in a much more meaningful way than just proof of concepts.